In Roadcraft, you're not just behind the wheel, you're at the top of the chain now. As head of operations, you're dropped straight into the thick of local areas hated by nature. Ancient gods are, just possibly unlucky as hell, taking command of an emergency restoration service company, trying to get crap working after floods and storms, and enough natural disasters have dropped on particular spots that you're needed. First, if you're hoping for a 1-to-1 sequel to SnowRunner or a direct MudRunner spiritual successor, you're not getting it. This is more like 4:10 ratios. For every scouting trip, there's probably 4 things you can do. For every 10 feet you go, there's probably 4 other feet that's dangerous as shit or requires you to think of the larger company and further repairs and restoration versus your own powertrain snapping off and flying through the air due to a mistimed creek fording. Think about it this way. I love a great steak, but I'm not going to throw a well-made burger back at the cook's face just because I knew he wasn't cooking it and hoped he would magically make me one. In Roadcraft, your job is to take your recovery team and get a region of the world working again after natural disasters. Plopping down in your scout vehicle, finding supplies, mapping out routes, locating working or broken down facilities, and basically being the boss on the ground as you mark it and tag it and then start making plans to get all those facilities back up and working again. And that's when the big rigs come in. 40-plus vehicles from dump trucks to tree cutters, power line layers, truck cranes, gantries, gigantic vehicle movers, log carriers, and more, leaping from vehicle to vehicle, either through your main menu or a hot swap button. In many ways, Roadcraft feels familiar and alien at the same time. It's a bit like a hug from a parent when you think you're too old. At first, the simulation parts start, resource gathering and planning. It can feel like they're in the way, guardrails on your first road trip alone. However, once I embraced the systems and what they were trying to do and that it was different, it sort of opens up. I don't see that Roadcraft will be for everybody. Fans are going to chafe like runner's rash with the lack of fuel tracking and full damage systems. Instead, though, I started to understand exactly what they were trying to do. What Roadcraft is a game with some of the same underpinnings, but more of the business sim on top. Each machine you can get into has its own set of controls and ways in which it's useful depending on what you want to do in that particular location. And comboing those together to build a road, the reason the game has its namesake in the first place, is rewarding as hell. Scouting with your pickup, for instance, this is where that SnowRunner feel comes in. And while you don't have to worry about gasoline on your own rig, you do have to watch out so you don't flip the damn thing over or drown it by powering through a creek that looks suspiciously shallow, so you figured, there's no reason to use the terrain tracker, which is, of course, that nice machine that you have, which plots out grids over the landscape to show you the depth and angle in particular spots. You grab another truck, load that up with the pipes, and then try to wrestle that damned beast across uneven terrain to the damaged section. And to mitigate some of that uneven terrain, you can do what the game is called, which is craft roads. At first, it'll show you how to do it with the automatic system. A mission comes up and it'll have you restore a section of road. Get all the required vehicles to one of the 2 ends of that section and then assign the vehicle to the lane that you want to lay down and get to work. But it does have to be in order. First, you have to gravel it or sand it, and that is using dump trucks to fill in the creeks, crevices, and uneven ground. Then you get your grader to come down and flatten that down. When that's done, laying down wet asphalt on top of it, and then finally rolling over it to turn that section into a nice piece of road that is far easily more navigated by you as well as the AI. You can also do this yourself with those same steps anywhere. So if you find an area almost impassable, grab the same vehicles and do it manually. And that's when experimentation really started to work. For example, I was mad that a ravine, normally very difficult to create a road over, was wasting my time. So I grabbed a bunch of pipes and scrap and threw them into the bottom until I could dangerously drive across it with the dump truck. Then I filled it with sand because now I could do that without getting stuck, smoothed it down, then plastered it with some steaming hot travel juice, and then rolled it down, cutting not only a good amount of time from my trip, but also making it so that the AI, when it was doing its thing, could get from point A to B without flipping upside down and dying in the sun. Then, as you discover more or complete the smaller objectives, new ones keep popping up, moving you from spot to spot, and you always have to identify how exactly to get there. Whack-a-mole situations where time and time again you are tasked with getting the entire region back to working status can feel a bit repetitive, but regardless of how those are given to you, you can do it any way you really want. And that means putting up bridges or tearing down roads that are already there for their scrap. No matter what, throughout the entire game, there is always something to do and some new way in which you can jump into it. And that complexity grows with time. And that means multiple situations you have to take care of all at the same time. You're not just trying to find a pipe that's burst, but you're trying to find 4 broken pipes, or replace them with new ones you made after recycling scrap in the game world, then build a road to unlock a new base, cutting down trees so that you can send a power line digger between the power station and the new base you just uncovered. Doing this, you can also leap into first-person mode, driving from the inside, or leap into the open camera to get a better eye on where you need to go. Here, the game also felt a bit like Power Wash Simulator at times, where spots that were filled with debris, I took 3 hours just cleaning it up and recycling the destroyed locations and items there, and then putting a road into that spot. As you complete those objectives, you also get rewards in the form of money, fuel, and unlocked vehicles for more missions. There are also better versions of many of the machines, with you starting out with the lowest end, usually with the nomenclature like Rusty, and then getting nicer ones. Most vehicles can also be sold if you end up doubling up and not needing them. I can say one thing though. The AI, especially if you are not taking insane care, can't drive worth a shit. Luckily, you can place waypoints everywhere to get from spot to spot to spot, but be aware these dudes are dogmatic as time. If there's the slightest deviation, they could, for example, go around a rock perhaps. They probably won't. That results in this weird conga line of upside down steel carrying work trucks because they all hit the same garden gravel that upturned them like fucking turtles. A lot of times you're going to be driving around and start to get this overarching idea that nobody else in the game can drive because you just keep getting alerts that the plots have failed. Oddly enough, this sort of shows some of the flexibility in the game. In fact, one way to get through all this or beyond it would be to just make a perfect road from one end to the other. However, that's sort of the juice. You get to decide. For those who want to complete the objectives, you can just do that. For those who want to dive in and get their hands dirty, tens of hours can be wasted on a single map to make every single thing perfect. It's the same way that House Flipper or Power Wash Simulator would have those moments where the game said objective complete, and you see that some random toys ride still has a bit of grime on it, and you're like, oh no, it's not, and you rush off to clean it. Putting it all together is not always great here. The game's shift and merging of two gameplay styles, it is noticeable in the HUD and the menu, which is not great. A lot of that is just because of all the hints it's trying to pop up and the different systems you can use. It starts out being frustrating. Over time, you start to pick things up and understand what this button does, and that a particular time that you hit escape is not going to take you back to the main menu, but is actually going to take you out of the spot that you're in back to the map itself. It's just little things like that that can be frustrating if you're an hour or two in. Driving here has a differential lock, all-wheel drive, and terrain scanner to show you where the rivers are deeper. Turn the all-wheel drive off and get a little bit more speed for your ride. You'll use those for traversing more difficult terrain, but at the same time, you're not going to have to use them all the time. You'll be able to switch them on and off. And that control, when it comes to mouse and keyboard or gamepad, those work great. However, the game also does have some steering wheel support. It's got like the G29 for PlayStation platforms, 920 for Xbox, 923, Thrustmaster 458 for the original Xbox, and then some others, including the Thrustmaster 150 for PS4 and PC. Be aware, though, that during the demo, people reported issues with the steering wheel and a particular bug or two that did pop up. And I will say this about the game. There are so many different options and so many different control schemes, not only the map, but the driving, as well as using the tools on the vehicles. Let me just suggest probably being near your mouse and keyboard or near your gamepad, because it does feel like with all of these different things, one of them is not going to translate perfectly. And trying to figure out the eccentricities of all of these game design decisions is like a lot of these sim games. It's not the first time this has happened, but it is noticeable in a title like this where it originally spawned from just driving around. You can also leap into the game with 3 other people for some co-op, making plans, trading jobs, taking over the different vehicles. That is if the host decides they can, because the host luckily does have a couple options here to restrict randoms from coming in and screwing everything up. But if you dive in with others and you have that one friend whose room looks like no one lives there because it's spotless, they can be charged with picking up and recycling debris, where the big brain of the group can scout around making plans for routes that make the most sense to get all the power from the station to the recycling center. And hopefully you all have that one buddy who loves a bit of risk. You can let them try to figure out a way to get across what looks to be impossible bodies of water with bridges or slowly building out their own roads. Cross-platform is a thing, but it was not turned on in the review. They say it'll be there day one. It also shares progression and has built-in voice chat if you want to use it. Now, when it comes to bugs, I had one 3 or 4 times during the gameplay, attempting tight turns and backing up near larger debris, or in my case in particular, buildings. Sometimes the vehicle would stick into the building and not come off, meaning I couldn't move. Switching out to another vehicle for a second and then hot switching back or reloading did fix it, but it was aggravating because it happened twice right where a recycling center with a tight entry point was, as well as another location with tight turns to get to a delivery part. I didn't see the AI have this issue though. They just had issues getting there or taking those tight turns if I didn't set the plot point up perfectly. The game also has an amazing sense of freedom. It lets you be risky or not risky at all. Trying to drag a pipe and get it to roll just enough to a spot to repair it with nothing but your scout is possible. Grab the main crane and the weight of it, it's nothing. You can now pick up that pipe. It's easy to do and it's super controllable, but it doesn't have storage on it. Buy a nice truck with a mini winch and you can do all that, but you consistently have to make sure that you have the weight in the vehicle set correctly. Otherwise, that thing is going to be Gray Lady Downing and disappear into the night by flipping over and over and just tumbling down some rocks. You'll be driving around, you'll be doing something, you'll see a problem and you'll think to yourself, you know what? I am going to try to give this a chance. And then you have a crane arm canted off to one side with another section of pipe in the back of your truck to try to balance this poorly strapped in material and get it some way. And like a tightrope walker, you're just consistently watching out for danger. I loved that. No matter what I saw, I was like, you know what? I think I can give that a try. Speaking of giving it a try, these guys have tried their own new engine for this title, and I would say that Roadcraft, it looks the part. It's merging their prior games into one. Landscapes are different. Everything has a post-apocalyptic look to it, which makes sense, as the places you go to have seen that massive flooding and earthquakes. What I love is the smaller details here, the smaller animations, like the hydraulic tap you get when you move a bucket a couple times and the entire vehicle shakes, the physics of the water and the mud and dirt turning into nasty glue around tires. All that's here, and that looks crazy good. What is not crazy good is the performance. Now, my God, the pop-in is insane in this game as well. When it comes to micro details like small rocks and debris, small dead bushes and otherwise, we're not talking about far in front of you. We're talking about a lot of times stuff just smattering around and coming into distance 10, 15 feet in front of your vehicle, really regardless of what setting you have it on. Also, it's not really at all rock solid when it comes to performance. There are some variations and variables going on here that will have you consistently fighting it, especially when you first turn it on. Some of the later maps with a ton of effects and some spectacular draw distances can also drop this frame rate. They suggest a 3080 for 1080p to 1440p, depending on upscaling used, and that seems about right, as that's almost exactly where the 3080 was hitting. I did notice some micro stutter, and it's much more noticeable in the busier levels and cropped up even when the game was getting 90 plus FPS. On the consoles, they have a fair number of options. Series S is 30 FPS upscaled to 1440p. On the Series X, PS5, and PS5 Pro, they have dynamic resolution versions for 60 FPS mode as well as a quality mode. Graphically, there is a lot to like in Roadcraft, but make no mistake, there's a fair bit of jank here, and the performance from the 2080 to the 4090 showed that while frame gen isn't required, DLSS or FSR is going to be a big help here, getting the FPS lows to not crater in the more detailed maps, as well as different settings that you can turn up or down. They suggest mirrors, which I didn't notice as much as shadows, being something that gave me more FPS. On the other hand, turning on DLSS and frame gen gets you that back, but I would really like to see them shore this up. When it comes to shoring up, this is a place where, let's be honest, man, I don't really require much from the audio when it comes to the music in these games. There's something that usually is sedate, maybe older Western movie style at times, and that's exactly what you get here. Almost always just sort of vibing in the background. It's not going to cause you to download the tracks. It's not there. It's sort of muzak for games, basically. Some basic guitar and arrangements that are thematic. Sometimes it reminded me of the tracks in a game like Hunter: Call of the Wild. They work. They just sort of play in the background or when you get an objective. However, the sound is pretty good in a weird way. It's like hearing a car crash and saying that's awesome, because a lot of the sound here is the droning of the vehicle, slowly fording a creek like a fat toddler barely able to touch a kiddie pool's bottom, and then the whine of an engine and the occasional crash and clunk of a car slamming into a rock. The spool up of the winch wire or the horrific sound of a pipe rolling down a hill, bouncing off every friggin' rock because you set it just in the wrong place is well done. These are sounds that, to be honest, are more utilitarian, and they work fine for me. When it comes to the voice, the main voice is the game's operator who tells you where to go, calls you up, says, hey, you need to go here, you need to go there, even though you're basically the company owner, but she's the one consistently giving you jobs, pops up, then goes away, and not really noteworthy. Not bad, though, either. Now, when it comes to the fun factor, all these coming together, some of the technical issues as well as the game's good look, but also the way in which it plays and the HUD, does it come together to be fun? I will say this, one place where Roadcraft got me was a consistent feeling of one more thing to do, but maybe not having the resources to do it. It's like those times you realize you're shopping on Amazon even though you have less money than normal. It's just the way we work, and the more I repaired, the more I recycled, the more one goddamn piece of concrete I found I had driven by 11 times. I saw that the 12th time while watching AI drive off into the unknown when following the road waypoints, and I thought to myself, you know what? This is haunting me. So I leapt into the truck, got the crane, drove 1 mile out of my way to get it, and then drove it to the recycling center. I'm not saying that makes sense. I'm saying I sensed I could make something out of it. Since everything you turn in gives you something else, you might as well. And that is where it grabbed me. Where Expeditions didn't seem to hit most consumers in the right place, Roadcraft at the very least drops a subtitling separating it from the Runner series completely. It's not without its compromises and in many ways contradictions. Within just a couple minutes, the differences start to add up. If differences always meant bad, that'd be one thing. But here, I actually don't think they are. This is one of those titles that takes a lot from the prior games, mixes in its own thing, and becomes really its own Zen state. Just like you can enjoy listening to cool, sedate music or sitting down and reading a book. They're both enjoyable for different reasons. When it comes to the rating, Roadcraft is Saber's newest entry. It's coming out for $40 for the standard, $50 if you want a vehicle bonus and early access to upcoming DLC later. This is releasing on May 20th for PlayStation 5, the series, systems, and PC. Despite the two styles of game having those complexity issues and some main objective repetition, it called me back time and again, and I'm still playing it now. Well worth buying right now. With over 60 hours in the campaign, probably way over that alone as well, or just taking on the side optional missions or multiplayer to help you build and repair and explore, Roadcraft just offers a different type of value. It's not like their prior games. It's good, it does its own thing, but its identity is distinctly a side-style title, sharing some similarities, but a little bit like that cousin who looks like they belong in the family versus finding out you have a brother because your dad stepped out for some extracurricular 4x4 off-roading with somebody else. It feels within the family generally, and I think it is well worth getting, even with the performance and sometimes noticeable micro stutter that popped up here. Puts a dampener on the enjoyment levels, but it didn't make them go away. This is one of those titles that I think a lot of people are actually going to like, and for sim fans or those people who just want to jump into something with a couple friends and go around and really play it the way you want to play it, Roadcraft nails that part. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Hey, check out the Patreon. It always helps the channel. As you guys know, we don't do sponsored trips anywhere. We're not going to Disneyland to look at new games, but you can always help out the channel or become a YouTube member or check out the Friday podcast, 10:30, Best Gaming Podcast on the other channel. If not, peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.
Looks like you'll need to do some hauling. Take the cargo truck and load it up with the concrete slabs and steel beams. Then deliver it to the phosphate plant. And if you're in the mood for extra